And you should be live, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Strategy and Resources Committee meeting on Tuesday, the 28th of January 2021. My name is Councillor Richard Siddle and I am the Chairman of the committee. This meeting has been held under regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April 2020 in response to the COVID-19 situation. And there are some meeting organisational issues that I need to go through. Could I please ask everyone present in this meeting to ensure your microphone remains muted when not addressing the committee. This will reduce background noises and avoid any unintentional disturbances. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to be recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please use the hands up function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you in the order that is indicated via Teams. I would like to remind you that apart from indicating points of order or that you have to leave the meeting, please do not use the chat function for any other purpose. When speaking, please ensure you reference a page number and paragraph number. And as there are a lot of items on the agenda, please try to keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. I would now like the officers taking part in the meeting at this moment in time, because we may have officers who join us later as required, to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Leslie.
Good evening, Chris Leslie, Director of Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Mr. Dodson.
Good evening, Paul Dodson, Director of Strategy, Performance and Governance.
Thank you, Mr. Dodson. Mr. Holmes.
Good evening, Richard Holmes, Director of Service Delivery.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Mrs. Green. She may not be here yet.
Good evening, members. It's Sue Green. I'm the Customers, Community and Casework Manager.
Thank you, Sue. Mrs. Wheatley.
Good evening, members. I'm Miss Hannah Wheatley, Specialist Services Manager.
Thank you, Mrs. Wheatley. Mr. Butcher.
Good evening, members. Stephen Butcher, Commercial Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher. Mr. Porteous.
Good evening, members. Lance Porteous, Lead Finance Specialist.
Thank you, Mr. Porteous. Mrs. Cardy.
Good evening, members. I'm Annette Cardy, Resources Specialist Services Manager.
Thank you, Mrs. Cardy. Mr. Morrell.
Chairman, I don't think he's with us yet.
Okay, look. And Miss Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Tara Bird, Committee Services Officer. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any officers that are here at the moment that haven't introduced themselves, Tara?
No, Chairman, I believe that's everybody.
Okay. And Mr. Winslow. I just put hand up.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Hello, members. My name's Matt Winslow. I'm the Strategy, Policy and Communications Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Winslow. Mrs. Cardy.
Just to introduce Debbie is on the call, Debbie White, and she'll be answering any procurement questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Cardy.
Good evening, members. I'm Debbie White, Lead Specialist for Procurement.
Hello, Debbie. Thank you very much. Okay, I think that's everybody, isn't it?
Yes, Chairman, I believe so. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. Before I call on the clerk to take the roll call of committee members, can I ask those councillors in attendance to introduce themselves, please?
Councillor Fleming in attendance.
Good evening, Councillor Fleming.
Councillor Anne Hull.
Good evening, Councillor Hull.
Thank you.
Good evening. Richie Morris here from Paraffin.
Good evening, Councillor Morris. I think that's all the additional ones that we've got. And we've got apologies from Alistair that his Wi-Fi is playing up at the moment. So he is here, but he's having issues with Wi-Fi. May I have any apologies for absence, please, Tara?
Yes, Chairman, do you want me to just call the roll call of the other members of the committee for you as well?
Yes, please, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Members, if you
Sorry,
just...
I skipped.
Okay. If you could just indicate if you're in attendance, please, starting with Councillor Mrs Channer, please.
Yes, I'm here, Tara.
Thank you very much. Councillor Durham.
Present, Tara. Thank you. Good evening, members.
Councillor Edwards.
Present, Tara. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Councillor Helm.
Good evening. Present, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
Yes, good evening, Tara. Good evening, members. Good evening, everybody. I'm here.
Good evening. Thank you. Councillor Siddle's here. Councillor Stump.
Good evening, Tara. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members and officers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Stilts, Chairman, is attending as a substitute for Councillor Skeens, who we have apologies from.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
SNR.
Yes, present, Tara. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Yes, present, Tara. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. And Chairman, Councillor Miss White, we believe we've been advised will be joining the meeting a bit later on.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 2, which was apologies for absence. Councillor Durham, you just raised your hand.
Chairman, I did. Yeah, thank you. My dinner has just been delivered to me, so I will turn my video off while I consume that. Thank you. Just to let you know.
I enjoy your dinner and thank you for informing us.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, so I move now to item agenda number 3, which is the minutes from the 19th of November 2020. It is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of November, found on pages 7 to 16, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move, and if you wish to second that motion, please unmute your microphone now and state your name, please.
Second, Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. If any members wish to raise a matter of accuracy, please use the hand up function to indicate, and I will invite you to speak. Before the meeting, I was informed by Councillor Morris, who has notified me that he was in attendance at that meeting, but he isn't noted as being in attendance. So could that amendment please be made, Tara?
Yes, of course, Chairman. Apologies for that. Missing that off. We'll get that sorted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other items of accuracy? No? Okay. Can I ask the committee to agree those by assent?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much. I now move on to item 4, which is the minutes from the 24th of November, a special meeting of Strategy and Resources. It is recommended that the minutes of the special meeting held on the 24th of November, found on pages 1720, and as you can imagine, I'm not going to go through those pages in turn, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move, and if you wish to second that motion, please unmute and state your name now.
Second, Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. If any member wishes to raise a matter of accuracy, please use the hand up function. Okay. Can I take that that we agree those minutes by assent?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
I now move to agenda item number 5, which is disclosure of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8, inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the needs arise throughout the meeting. If any member has an interest to declare, please use the hands up function now. And the first person I have is Penny Channer, Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Chairman. It's my normal one, Chairman. I'm going to declare that it's non-pecuniary. I'm a member of Essex County Council, and obviously bearing in mind the various documents and how we work with Essex and other matters, and Essex is mentioned. And also will declare, Chairman, certainly regarding the capital strategy and other documents, it does refer to it. There's a project there. And I will declare I'm a member of the Crouch Harbour Advisory Committee. And therefore there is a vessel mentioned, and also in the papers about houseboats and things. So I'm going to declare that. In the past, I've always removed myself from meetings when the lease Helig and matters surrounding it has been discussed. I think I can remain in the chamber because obviously things have moved on there. But I probably may not comment if that item gets under too much discussion. I haven't had a chance to speak to the monitoring officer, but it's a non-pecuniary thing. And I've always kept myself out of discussions at the Crouch Harbour Advisory Committee when that vessel might have been discussed. So that's why I feel I can remain. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. Councillor Luggan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest in agenda item number 7, please. I've had conversations with several of the business owners in the past, and was a previous barge owner and operator.
Okay.
Non-pecuniary, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Luggan. Councillor Durham.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I declare a non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council. And in respect of item 21 on tonight's agenda, I'm Chairman of Visit Essex, but that again is non-pecuniary. It's just in the interest of openness and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. Could I ask all councillors, once they've made their point, to lower their hands, please? Councillor Stilts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to declare non-pecuniary in item 7, as I also know some of the barge owners. I'm also a member of the Malden Heritage Harbour Association and the Little Ship Club, in case that comes up.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stilts. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. I would like to declare an interest non-pecuniary item 7. I'm a member of the Thames Barge Trust. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Edwards. So that, I believe, is all interests that have been shown, and there are no more hands up. So I now move on to item number 6 on the agenda, and that's public participation. And I can advise that we have not received any submissions from members of the public. So now we move on to agenda item number 7, discretionary fees and charges 21-22. Discretionary fees and charges found on pages 121 to 144. Shortly, I will call on the officer to present these items. Members, I will just say this reminder once, and that is, if you wish to speak on this item and any other item, please make this known by using the hands up function within this meeting. Once you've made that your point and you've asked your question or made your statement, can you please ensure that you lower your hands once you've done that? So Councillor Edwards, could you please lower your hand? I will then come to you in turn. Keep please your points clear and succinct. Mr. Leslie, please present the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual fees and charges set-in report for next year, and the detailed fees and charges are in the appendix. Obviously, to assist members, we have also included an Appendix B, which I believe to be on page 143, a summary of those changes, but hopefully it makes it easier to understand all the details contained within there. Obviously, following a meeting of the Finance Working Group, we've also included at recommendation 2 consideration for reductions of the wharfage charges there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Before we move to the recommendation, what I would like to say at this particular moment in time is the Finance Working Group was a new working group, and I would just like to thank all the members of that working group for the hard work, along with the officers, that they've put in over the last few months around the finances and around to come into this meeting today. And I would like to thank all the officers and all the members for their contribution in terms of where we've got to this evening. Now, the recommendations, I will put those for a seconder. However, that has no influence in terms of what we decide to buy. We'll put the recommendations before we have the debate, and the recommendations to the council, item little 1, that the detailed fees and charges for 21-22, as set out in Appendix A, be agreed, subject to recommendation little 2. And little 2 is the options for wharfage fees outlined in section 4 of this report are considered and a fee agreed to be put forward to the council. If any member wishes to second that motion, please unmute your microphone.
Yes, second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swain. I will now invite members to make any comments on the report. Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Chair. I was just removing my hand so that I don't, it's remiss of me afterwards. Chair and members, it has come as no surprise that I wish to speak on this. In simple terms, I wish to support the 50% reduction for the barge owners for wharfage costs. I've done a significant amount of research, and obviously, as I've declared, being an ex-barge operator, Malden is synonymous with the Thames sailing barges. And these historic and very beautiful vessels that have donned our paperwork, our crests, and have brought so much to our town are under threat. This has been a terrible situation with COVID. It's impacted everything, and especially the business owners and the trusts that are trying to operate down there. And I feel that this council or this committee has within its power to make a recommendation of 50%. It seems a lot of money to be able to say we're going to take out of our budget because of the pressures that are upon us budgetary. But last year we had one barge leave the quay because of the increases in wharfage fees. Another vessel was placed upon the blocks, so it wasn't paying wharfage fees. That's a significant reduction in a sum of income. One more barge would completely wipe out 50% of what we could potentially get. So by encouraging the vessels to remain in Malden, by supporting the vessels to continue their businesses, which is compounded by a document that I located from our website, a report from Malden District Tourism Strategy, EB029A, which talked about a market overview about the cost of tourism, what it brings into our town. And this document stated that the economic impact, we had 2.96 million visitors and 1.41 million of income from the district was raised. And it then clearly says on page number 3 of that report that tourism products, and I'll just quote this before I finish, it's very short. It says the product strengths include the barges and the boats, the quay and the historic quaintness of the town. So I feel I can't add any more to that. I feel it would be remiss of us if we didn't support with a 50% increase and then maybe look at CPI increases over the next 3 years with a review at that time. So I wholeheartedly support the 50% and I hope this committee sees that this is the right thing to do going forward for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry for the delay. Likewise, I'm just removing my hand. I've got a query through you, please, for officers. I understand that these barges are already receiving a 50% discount on their wharfage, and other businesses using the wharf don't, which I think many of them weren't aware of at a previous point in the past, and were not necessarily very happy about. So could I have confirmation about that particular point before I say anything else, please, Chairman?
Mr. Leslie, could you clarify exactly whether there is any discount currently on the barge wharfage?
Yeah, I don't believe there is, but I'd like to refer perhaps to the service who might be able to confirm or correct me.
Mr. Holmes?
Thank you, Chairman. There are a range of discounts depending on the location of vessels and where they come from. I don't have that detail to hand. Mr. Butcher is also on the call. He may have that. If not, I'll have to come back to you. But yeah, there is some differential, but I can't give you the exact detail, I'm afraid.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. So can we see if Mr. Butcher can find those figures, and if I move on to Councillor Durham?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, obviously, with my Visit Essex hat on, tourism is absolutely vital to the district, and as it's vital to the county. I mean, in a normal year, tourism and hospitality puts £3 billion a year into the Essex economy. And, clearly, as Councillor Lagan has said, the barges are synonymous with the Malden district, and it would be a great shame to lose them. But I'm a little bit nervous about creating a precedent just for the barges. If we reduce the fee for the barges, you have the kiosks, for example, on the Prom Park, who have suffered from this in this pandemic equally as much as the barges, and lots of other businesses. And it'd be very difficult to justify cutting the wharfage fees down for them and then not doing the same for the kiosks and any other service that we've got. And I'm not trying to be a killjoy. I'm not trying to make life difficult for the barge owners, but I think by taking this step, it's a little bit it's not even-handed. Clearly every pound that we take is important, and it would be tragic to lose the barges, but I'm more concerned about the signal that this sends out to other businesses that pay the district council a fee. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Durham. Councillor Channer.
Sorry, I've had a bit of difficulty with my mute here again.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In fact, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Durham has raised points that I was actually going to be making, and I think Councillor Thompson might be correct. I do seem to recollect something about the barges already having a discount, and I seem to recollect the previous leader at some stage actually meeting with the barge owners, and I thought there may have been a slight increase in their wharfage fees in, I think, perhaps the budget of last year. But obviously officers need to confirm that. But I am following my memory, like Councillor Thompson, in that I seem to recollect there was a discretion already applied in terms of the barges. But I do agree they are iconic and they're very, very important. However, I could see perhaps other sort of approaches. People might feel the same about their own sort of vessels or other areas as well, which could then obviously create a bit of a difficult situation, possibly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Channer. In terms of my point of view, I would assent to Councillor Lagan, and that is that the barges mean Malden. Malden means the barges, and therefore we have to support the barges and what they mean to Malden. We did at S&R just over a year or so ago look at the fees, and at that particular point there was a proposal to increase the wharfage fees over time. What we decided at that particular point, from what I can remember, is that we decided that we would give a small rise and then not to increase those fees after we'd had discussions with the barge owners. Now we're now in exceptional situations, and because the barge owners do not have the same kind of situation as a business and a business premise, they haven't been receiving the discount that other businesses perhaps have done. And my view is that we need to be seen to be supporting what Malden stands for and ensuring that we send the right signals to the district, to the town and to the barge owners that we are prepared to support our maritime heritage and what the barges mean to Malden. Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think any concessions that were made last year were fairly minor, and as you say, it was in the context of an attempt to actually increase fees. I think you've just intimated, they are in a different position. The kiosks are commercially competitive operations, and that's quite different from the situation of the barges, where we don't have people competing to try and get a berth in Malden. In fact, what we would like to do is to try and encourage one or two more to come, and that could only be done by making the wharfage fees, which we say, attractive enough, and bearing in mind that we also have charitable trusts running these as exceptions. As I think we all realise, the barges are fundamental really to not only to the image of Malden, but they're actually going to be a corner piece of any developing strategy to make more of the maritime heritage and around the Hythe, as Mr. Butcher could probably validate. They would be rather unique, really, particularly if we have a visitor centre there for maritime purposes, in being actually sort of working museum pieces, which is rather unusual. And I think if we make a concession of this, whatever, 25, 50%, the difference is not great in this great overall scheme of things. We should see it more in terms of part of the promotional budget for the district, rather than as an expense saving or expense concession, in order to underwrite the position of the barges in as a centrepiece, really, of the maritime promotion for Malden.
Thank you, Councillor Swain.
I would certainly support the 50% reduction.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Before I go back to Councillor Thompson, because I have now a response from Mr. Butcher. Mr. Butcher.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just for clarity, I've just sort of scrambled back and looked at previous S&R committee report from December 2019. So, as other councillors alluded to, yes, there was previously a 50% discount applied. With effect from April 2020, we started charging a new baseline figure of 3,575. That was the figure paid in 2019-20 plus a 10% increase. So in real terms, there's still a 40% discount in comparison to other wharfage fees.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Butcher. Councillor Helm. Oh, sorry, Councillor Thompson.
Sorry. Oh, thank you, Chairman. I did put my hand up as you mentioned my name. Yes, I wasn't actually sure whether the current discount was 40% or 50% because I had lost track of what happened with the 10% that was previously discussed. But Mr. Butcher has put us clear on that one. Yes, of course I support the barges, but they aren't the only thing that makes Malden, and I think I would be very happy to continue the discount as it is, but it does concern me because of fairness to other businesses. The thing about the barges is they can up and off at any time, and I've been on the council long enough to remember being bitten by the Dawn, which we as a council sunk large amounts of money and massive amounts of officer time into, and after all that they moved to Kent. So I mean, the barges can move at any time. They might have a business need to move. I would have thought actually the thing that affected the barges' use of Malden Quay more than anything would be the lack of dredging, which I know is a whole other story, but I understand they have more and more difficulty with every passing year actually accessing the quay at the times they would really like to because of the lack of depth of water there. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Helm.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Thompson has mentioned something I was going to mention. If we reduce the fee by 50%, who's going to pay for the dredging? Are we going to expect it to pay for that as well? The barges will need cleaning out so they can access it. And if we want more barges, we've still got to dig it out. So you're catch-21 here. Although I want to support the barges, we need to support then all tourist operations in Malden because they're all important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Helm. I will go to Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fleming, you're on mute.
Sorry. A couple of members have referred to the impact of COVID on the barge operators. I just wanted to ask Mr. Leslie whether they are eligible to apply for the discretionary grant, and if indeed some of them have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Do you have that specific data, Mr. Leslie?
Yeah, we've had some of, not specifically for those ones, but I can talk generally about wharfage in the sense that some are eligible to pay business rates. That's on the moorings. Therefore, if they meet the criteria and they pay the business rates, then and meet the eligibility criteria, then some of them can do. I know some have, but I don't know exactly to hand which ones have, but I do know some have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Leslie. I'm now going to go to Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry I was late to this meeting, but I got held up on the way home from the office. Just to echo on from what Councillor Helm said, although I support the barges, the bigger problems are with the dredging. And in actual fact, I raised this with BRB recently about dredging as part of the Breville Power Station if it goes ahead. And for me, this is something that we should be progressing more than trying to claw back the charges, because I understand we reduce the charges anyway. And I think those that can claim the money back from the council, I'm sure will already be doing so. So I would say I think that to help the barges further more than short term reducing the fees is to actually look forward to options where we can help them long term and to do the long term sustainability, which basically where what we should be doing is protecting our assets, and that for me is part of it. So I would just like to ask the committee that we start progressing talks on this matter if we're not already doing it.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Durham, I notice that you've raised your hands again, so I will bring you back, but if you could be really succinct, please.
It's a question. The under wharfage, there are lots of different categories, static events, etc., and indeed wharfage at Burnham. Now, way of getting around this partially, because it does refer to the fully rigged Thames sailing barges, which is actually what we're worried about. If we hold all of the other charges under wharfage at the same rate and just reduce that for the qualifying fully rigged Thames sails barges, that I think might be a halfway house that would be certainly more acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Durham. Councillor Lagan, again, if you can be succinct, please. Oh, your hand's gone, so you're not coming back, Councillor Lagan. Okay.
Yes, sorry, Chair, I just hit the hand to get so I don't interfere with the protocols. Just thank you for letting me come back, and very succinctly, I'm amazed by the knowledge of non-Malden members to do with the Malden dredging and how barges sit. I'm pleased that we have that knowledge here, but I also I won't want to go on the aspects of the past. We're debating this situation. We're not debating whether BRB build a power station or not. We're debating a reduction of a daily income of £29.38 if we choose to support businesses that are very, very difficult to actually raise and generate money. You don't see the barge owners in big houses and big cars.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Logan. Councillor Swain, again, if you're coming back, please be succinct.
I will be. Yes, I think the comments about dredging are very apposite, but I think that is something quite separate that we do need to look at, and it's a much more complicated issue, but it obviously has a bearing upon the usability of the wharf, which is really reflected in the lack of time that barges have, and therefore I would therefore like to propose that we do recommend to Council the 50% reduction.
Before we come to that, I will go to Councillor Channer first.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Could I just ask, because I noticed Appendix B and it did say no change at all the fees and charges actually do have listings of, I presume, officer recommendation. Obviously, CLT would have considered, I suspect, no doubt, finance working group. And the wharfage fees is on there and says no change, and it's also not deemed sensible to try and raise at this particular time. So we were talking about freezing the charges. Can I just ask, Mr. Leslie, I've heard what you've said about some of them. Has anyone, was there a suggestion in finance working group at all that someone should go and discuss anything with the barge owners at all? Has anyone been down and had a conversation with the barge owners, officer or member wise, for discussion? Because I do recollect in the past, as I said, and I'm glad it's been clarified, they have already the, well, we've now learned it's 40%, obviously, because there was the 50%, and then the previous leader met with them and had a discussion. And at that time, it seemed to be that there was an amicable agreement, my understanding. I can see Councillor Lagging nodding no, but that is my recollection, and that's what went through at the last budget. So I just seek some qualifications on dialogue with the barge owners from the authority, really.
Thank you, Councillor Chanette. So I know that from my discussions at the Finance Working Group, and what we talked about was that Mr. Butcher and I also sort of put forward myself that another representative to go and speak with the barge owners. As far as I'm aware, I don't think that's happened at that particular time. I remember from the discussions at Strategy and Resources that we had in December and after that, that there had not been positive discussions. There had not been constructive discussions between the barge owners and the leader of the council at that particular time. So that wasn't the case. And I don't think it's relevant to what we're discussing this evening. So I would now like to move forward with the recommendation, and I am going to put forward in terms of the voyage fees that we do offer a 50% discount for the barges for this financial year. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconder, Councillor Lagan, please, and a recorded vote, please, Chair.
OK, so we've now moved to the recorded vote. So the recorded vote is that we are doing the two things together. So item 1, that the fees and charges for 21-22 are agreed, and that the recommendation that the wharfage fees outlined in section 4 are discounted by 50%. Tara, could you do the vote, please?
If I might just come in, how long is the reduction period for? Because that wasn't clear in the recommendation.
For this financial 21-22.
Thank you, Chairman, members. If you could just indicate if you're for, against or abstaining when I call your name, please, starting with Councillor Mrs. Channer. So this, just to clarify, it's for the recommendations as in the report, but with the 50% discount for the wharfage. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Channer.
Yes, thank you. I will abstain. And when we get to obviously the 23rd of February, I think some of the things might be a bit clearer in terms of this, because Councillor Durham made some very good points.
OK, thank you, Channer. Councillor Channer, we are just doing the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
Abstain, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Helm.
Abstain.
Councillor Lagan.
For, please, Tara.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Stilts.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
Abstain.
And Councillor Miss White.
I can't vote on this. I missed the full debate, so
yes,
whether I vote. Yeah, no worries.
So thank you. As the Chairman, the results of that recorded vote are 6 for, nobody against, and 4 abstentions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. So we now move on to item number 8, which is the Treasury Management Strategy for 21-22. Councillor Helm, if you could lower your hand, please, as we moved on from that previous item. Mr. Leslie, could you please present the report?
Thank you. So the Treasury Management Strategy is required to be approved annually and sets out how the council manages its cash flows. Its core elements remain unchanged from last year. The council's external Treasury advisors, Arlene Close, have reviewed the strategy and provided some of its content, particularly around the economic outlook. The Code of Practice on Treasury Management lists 12 Treasury Management practices, and how the council addresses these is set out in Appendix 2 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. So I now need to move on to the recommendation, and the recommendations as set out in the report are as follows. To the council, that the Treasury Management Strategy 21-22 Appendix 1 be approved. If a member wishes to second that motion, please unmute your microphone.
Second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swain. I will now invite members to make any comments on the report. I have no hands up. So I will take that we have agreed the report by assent. Can I have that, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree.
So we now move on to item agenda number 9, capital and investment strategies for 21-22 and the minimum revenue statement 21-22, found on pages 195 to 222. Mr. Leslie, could you please present this report?
Okay, so there is a requirement for the council to have these strategies and have them approved annually again. The capital strategy shows that no borrowing is required and expenditure will be met from the grants and the capital reserve. The minimum revenue provision statement, Appendix 4, does show debt. However, I will point out that this is actually in relation to vehicle lease commitments, which are funded from revenue rather than a need to borrow, how they're accounted for, essentially. The capital bids here are at Appendix 2. They have been through the Finance Working Group. They have been kept to a minimum this year in light of the pandemic, but obviously need to include items such as health and safety obligations. The details of each of those bids are contained in the appendix, which gives more detail around each of the projects.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leslie. So the recommendations as set out in the report are as follows. The committee considers and reviews this report and the attached appendices and recommends them for approval by the council. So to the council, that capital structure appendix 1 be approved, that the capital projects bid appendix 2 be approved, that the investment strategy appendix 3 be approved, that the minimum revenue provision statement be approved. If any member wishes to second that motion, please unmute your microphone and state your name.
Okay, second.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. You're my stalwart in terms of the seconding.
Well, it's formality, isn't it?
And again, before I invite anybody to speak, I would like to thank the Finance Working Group in terms of the work we put in terms of getting these things. As it says in the report, we have tried to take a prudent and cautious approach to this expenditure and to ensure that the focus is what we can afford until we understand further implications later this year. So the idea is hopefully that we come back to some of the capital bids and review them once we move further into the year. Would any other member like to speak on this item? Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to Appendix 2, Parks Vehicle Rolling and Replacement Programme 56, and it says these are essential. I was just wondering, could this be something that could be spread over a 2-year period? I think last year there were 7 items of replacement for the park, so do we look at things for a rolling programme of when we replace items? So last year I think there was some, I think that included a mower, and this year we've got the vehicles. And can I then just ask how many perhaps proposed capital projects did come forward, because I'm assuming these are the ones that have been seen to be the ones that, as you gave in your introductions, those that should progress. So really just to know where they were vetted, if you like, and where decisions were made which should come before the committee, because it might have been helpful to see the whole lot. And I do note also from the document itself, the capital document that's before us, it does say that full details of the proposed capital bids for 2021-22, including project appraisals undertaken, were presented to council for approval on the 23rd of Feb. So I'm just wondering, would it not have been helpful to have all of that here tonight? And also perhaps, just Chairman, I think for a number of items on the agenda, the Finance and Working Group minutes, it might have been helpful because obviously the Finance Working Group, it seems, is reporting back, but the reporting back is all encapsulated within these documents. It's not clear of maybe what discussions took place within that working group for everyone to see how perhaps certain things have been arrived at.
So if
Just a point I make.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. If we go back to the committee meeting in November, the 4 capital project bids was put forward. And at that time, if you go back to that agenda, there was a big detail in terms of those capital project bids. In terms of what we've done and in terms of what the officers have done, we focused on the essential items, and the things that are considered perhaps not as essential at this moment in time have been reviewed. And I've just been notified that working group information is available to all members. I'm sure Mr. Leslie can provide that if you haven't been able to access it. So we have gone through a process. All the capital expenditure bids did come to this committee back in November. So it has already been presented to this committee.
I'm talking about council, Chairman. It does say that everything will go to council on the 23rd because not all the membership's part of this committee.
Mr. Leslie, did you want to come back? You just popped up and...
Thank you. Yeah, happy to clarify that statement. I appreciate the wording there is probably rather misleading in that sense. What we have in documentation is that which is in the appendices. So that is the documentation which will come through to council, but I accept that is rather misleading that it does say council when it's already provided in this document, so that there's no further information. So apologies for that.
So it is only these items that are going towards council, and the other ones that we've put on hold. Yeah, we will come back at a later stage. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I'm not sure this is 100% relevant, but it just jogged my memory. At the Finance and Working Group, I actually asked for a report to be done where we costed out the benefits of buying machinery and providing labour as opposed to using contractors, because in my experience, contractors are always more effective. They've got a slightly more I don't know, they're keen to get work done very quickly because it's in their interests, because they'll probably get paid per job rather than just a wage. And I did ask for a report to come forward where we could compare the costings, because obviously I was worried about wage creep and buying machinery if we could outsource it cheaper. And I don't, unless I'm mistaken, I haven't actually seen it. So I wonder if, one, I'm blind and can't see it, or two, whether it was done.
So that work hasn't yet been done because, yeah, that would be a separate piece of work to the capital projects bid, which is what we're looking at. In terms of that, and in terms of the strategy, in terms of the resourcing the parts department, yeah, there is a whole piece of work that could be done there. And in terms of also, in terms of a revenue thing, what what I understand is Mr. Butcher is that we are looking for the opportunities to use that and to use the parts department as a revenue earner. So obviously, when that moves forward, it is a separate item to this particular agenda. So at this moment in time, that is not what we're discussing. Councillor Durham.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I mean, this is, let's be honest, this is the smallest capital list that I've seen in 10 years. So, and for obvious reasons, and I do support this item. I'm just looking at the new berthing at Burnham when Liz Hellig finally goes, and that's something that we've been working on for a long time. £120,000 is quite a lot. That's showing an annual income of £24,000, which, when you look at it against what we've just been discussing, seems like an awful lot. I'm just wondering what the ROI is on that. It's, as I said, £120,000 is a great deal of money. If it is going to produce a positive income for the authority, then it should be looked at, but it looks like quite a long-term payoff.
From what I remember, and in terms of the cost-benefit analysis that was presented by Mr. Butcher, it should pay off within 5 years. So we should start pay off that expenditure within 5 years.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To agree with Councillor Durham, the list of capital projects is incredibly small, and I just want to acknowledge and appreciate the working group, yourself, Chair, and especially the officers, because the list was rather large, and the due diligence and scrutiny that went into looking at the sort of essential spends has resulted in these works being proposed now. So I think that there has been an awful lot of work done behind the scenes to get to a level where it is essential and would be beneficial to the district. So I just want to acknowledge and appreciate Mr. Leslie and the team. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Logan. Councillor Channer, you want to come back? Could you be succinct, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It was just the issue of the two vehicles, and obviously I appreciate what you said about the previous meeting, and now Mr. Leslie's confirmed that perhaps the wording was misleading in the report. The 56,000, are they going to be two new vehicles? And my question really was, obviously it says essential, so I'm assuming they're both required in this current year.
They are, and it was due to the point where the current vehicles are likely to break down. But I can go to Mr. Butcher if he wants to answer that in any more detail.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, just to reiterate what you've said, they are essential items only. We really have whittled it down, and so much so that we'll be running some of the vehicles at risk this year, that they may break down, and you know, if we need to, then we'll come back to council and committee for further capital investment in the course of the year. But we work closely in the working group to try and really reduce the capital money being spent this year. But what you see there is the essential items only.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Butcher. So what I'd like to do is, can we agree those recommendations via assent?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much.
Agreed.
So I now move to agenda item 10, revised 2020-21 estimates, original 21-22 budget estimates, and council tax 21-22. Found on pages 2200 to 250, lots of 20s there. In a moment, I'd like to call Mr. Leslie to present that report. That's a good tongue twister.
Okay, so as previously reported to the committee in the past, COVID has had a significant impact on the council finances. And it's estimated that this will cause a £700,000 overspend at the end of the year. I think that's reflected in the previous reports as well. The largest impact is coming from the loss of car parking income and payments to the leisure provider, I think that we're aware of. The proposed budget for next year is currently showing a small surplus of 31,000. With the council having benefited from another year of the new homes bonus that was announced in the provisional settlement. There is a proposed £5 increase in council tax in the budget, taking the average, that's the band D amount, to £207.40. This would generate additional £125,000, which over a 4-year period is an additional £500,000. There remains significant risk from the pandemic to successfully achieving the proposed budget, and Table 3 at paragraph 3.18.5 does outline some high-risk areas and their significant financial impacts. Appendix 2 and 3 of the report provides budgets at a detailed level. However, we've got the medium-term financial strategy report up next, which provides more of a summarised position, and I'll talk through that report next as well. My statement, where I give assurance on the robustness of the budget and adequacy of reserves, is at Appendix 5, and the minimum level of reserve of 2.6 million remains unchanged and is forecast to be above this by the end of next year.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. So the recommendations as set out in the report are as follows. Little 1, that the committee notes the main details of the provisional local government finance settlement 21-22 described in sections 3.4 of this report. To the council, Little 2, that the following be approved. A, the revised 2021 and original 21-22 general fund revenue budget estimates, appendices 1, 2 and 3. B, an average band D council tax of £207.40, excluding parish precepts, which is a £5 increase for 21-22, Appendix 1. Policies on the designated use of financial reserves, Appendix 4. Maintain the current policy of a minimum general fund balance of £2,600,000. If any member wishes to second that motion, please unmute your microphone and state your name.
Second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swain. Would any item now wish to make a comment on the reports? I'll take that as assent then. Okay. Councillor
Mr. Chairman, so sorry.
Yeah.
Did you miss out recommendation little 3, Mr. Chairman? Or did I just turn a deaf ear?
It might not be on my guide, so hold on a minute. Where are we?
I could be wrong, Chair.
We're on number 10, aren't we? There isn't. So yes, little 3 is not on my chairman prompt. So little 3, I'll say that the council gives due regard to the Director of Resources, Section 151 officer, statement on the robustness of the budgets and adequacy of the reserves in Appendix 5. So again, could I have a seconder for that as well, please?
Yeah, happy to, yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Durham. Councillor Channer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Obviously, for the budget, there's the 3 main streams of income, isn't there? Fees and charges, grants, council tax. Could I just have confirmation? Because I'm thinking back to the briefing now, and I'm very well aware of the monies to help us from the government to help with COVID-19, and I recollect we've set up a contingency fund. I think that was 2 elements. It was there's a lower tier services grant, I believe, and also the COVID-19 funding. But I seem to recollect COVID specific funding. Are there any outstanding things that we still need to be notified of at this current time? Because obviously the budget, when on the 23rd of February, there will look more detail. We'll have the precept of parish councils, and I know they're not included in the budget as such like that, but also what the Police and Crime Commissioner might be advocating. But is there any unknowns? And I think there might be, because there's the pooling arrangements that we have. I'm not quite clear that all the figures we're totally aware of. Now, they may or may not have an influence on the budgetary calculations, but the £5 is a 2.47 increase, I think, which is, I think we're using 0.7 as the inflation rate as well. So it seems the budget's coming forward with the options put forward, either 2% or 5%, which is obviously the larger, and therefore obviously it seems we're going for the larger element, which is the £5. So there's a couple of questions there. Can perhaps through you, Chair, Mr. Leslie, advise what other information might be coming through before we get to the 23rd of February, when hopefully all certainties will be known?
So we are going for the largest increase that we can do without a referendum, which is the £5. As far as I'm aware, there are no other grants or monies coming from government at this moment in time. So I believe that Mr. Leslie has presented what our budgets will be for the following year. So there is no additional funding. What Mr. Leslie is presenting to us tonight is what the funding is for 21-22 at this moment in time. So obviously there will be the precepts that Essex County Council set, and but that is all separate and is to the budget that we're setting ourselves this evening, and that will be going to full council. Mr. Leslie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on a couple of the points, I think in terms of the pooling was mentioned to that side. Now the pooling is based on actuals, so we only know when we get to the end of the year what the actual pooling results are, and when we close the accounts. So we have to go on estimates, and we use Essex County Council coordinates that. So for this year, we won't know the actuals obviously until the accounts are closed, and the same for next year. Until we actually get to the end of next year, we're not going to know what the actual poolings is. So we use estimates currently from Essex County Council. I think that's in regards to 3.5.3 of one of the reports, which I've just had a look at. So I understand what's being asked after reading that. There is and I can't remember if it's in the report off the top of my head, but there is £15 million the government have announced to be allocated in respect of audit fees across the country. Now, we don't know what that allocation will be at this stage. It could be a very small allocation for us, given the size of the authority for that. But there are also some additional costs in relation to that. But it's also hard to predict. So at this stage, we don't know around that side. So I just wanted to provide a bit more clarity around that. And I think the COVID grant, I don't think there was a question on that. I think that was a statement. So yeah, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to provide.
Councillor Channer, do you want to? You still got your hands up as well, Mr. Leslie's on. Do you have any further questions?
Yeah, yes, please. Yes, Mr. Leslie's mentioned the 15 million. Yes, that is coming forward because the Redmond, as we know, has affected the audit, and we know indeed it was through the briefing process. Mr. Leslie did highlight what that is shown. I think a number of us were quite concerned about actually, and I know the leader was. But I have read the 15 million in the Jenrick's, the MP, Mr. Jenrick's comments. I got the impression reading it, Chairman, that in fact the 15 million, I got there'd be significant coverage. So I feel that's a useful bit of knowledge we need to have, and I'm hoping that comes forward soon because I thought they were going to let us know relatively soon. But also I'm aware from PGA that there was going to be a meeting also with the auditors. I believe the chairman and vice chairman were having that because there was going to be a discussion regarding what we're referring to now. So I would like to perhaps be aware of any outcomes of that. I'm sure we all might be interested because at PGA, Mr. Leslie, you made a statement beforehand, but also at a meeting I was at with the leader, I'm forgetting which one it was now, but a number of us couldn't recall actually the essence of that. Well, a doubling, really. That's what we're talking about. That is what we were talking about. Okay. So I think that's quite significant, have all the information surrounding that in our budget processes. And hopefully that will be before, we get that by the 23rd of February.
Obviously, we don't have any control of that coming forward, do we, Mr. Leslie?
No, we don't. And I think it's appreciated that some budgets, obviously, may be better. Some budgets may be worse. I think that's part of the estimates.
And one of the things that's very good with Mr. Leslie and the way that he does do our finances and that is he is very cautious in terms of things. So he does tend to go for the worst case scenario. So hopefully things, which is I think in the current situation is the right approach for a financial officer, and I commend him for that. Councillor Stilts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to assure Councillor Channer, we actually haven't had the meeting on that audit report yet on that budget, but as soon as we do, that will come back to PG&A. So just to assure her that we are still on the case for that.
Thank you, Councillor Stilts. So I'd like to now move on to the vote. Can I agree these reports via assent?
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you very much. So we now move to
Chairman. I will reserve judgment until I see all the budget papers, and hopefully some of this information Councillor Stilts has given, we might know that as well if the meeting is held before the budget.
So if you do not give us assent, we have to go to a recorded vote. Do you want a recorded vote, Councillor Channer?
Chairman, I don't think it has to be recorded, but I think the right.
It does have to. If there is not full assent, there has to be a recorded vote. So, Councillor Channer, are you asking for a recorded vote?
I shall put my caveat on that then, that I will support, but it will be dependent on some of this information coming forward, and Councillor Stilts might be having that meeting, which might be helpful actually.
Okay, so we are now taking this by assent. Can I have assent, please?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So we now move to our agenda item 11, the medium-term financial strategy for 2021 to 22 to 22, 23, 24, found on pages 251 to 296. Mr. Leslie, could you please present the report?
Okay, so in the report, table 1 there, at paragraph 4.1, I think on page 252, if mine is correct, that gives quite a nice summary of the annual changes that take place to the budget, sort of good overview of the budget set in there really. Of course, there's more detail around some of those key items, such as the growth items there that have been through the finance working group and reduced to sort of the minimum levels around health and safety and sensible investment there. And they're summarised at table 2 in the report. And that also shows the funding from the reserves, mainly in regards to the local development plan and local development scheme there, which is being met from the new homes bonus and a transformation reserve. Further information as well at Appendix 2 in terms of the details of those growth items is provided. Repairs and renewals at Appendix 3. Again, they've been reviewed by the Finance Working Group. Just pressures I'll point to as well, because pressures make up a part of that, and the details around that are in the MTFS on page 280, Appendix A. I will highlight a large figure within there, which relates to the pension deficit contribution. We paid 1.6 million this year as part of the triennial review. And of course, that's going to be removed from the budget for next year. However, we are going to contribute £520,000 a year to the pension deficit reserve. So for the next triennial review, we have sufficient funding to cover that. The COVID impact is largely uncertain to predict, and as we previously mentioned, we've got a contingency of 371,000 in next year's budget for this. And that's been made possible by the additional government grants that we've had, the COVID grant that's come in particular to support that. However, of course, as we said before, there's a risk that this won't be enough, and table 3 in this report, the same as the previous one, really highlights those key risks and the challenge we're up against there. Just lastly, I would point to chart 1 there in the body of the report, paragraph 4.2, which shows an increase in budget gap due to the decline in funding in 22-23, and of course inflationary pressures there based on a do-nothing scenario, with the general fund balance dropping below the minimum level of 2.6 million by 23-24. Obviously, action will be taken to try and address this, and a new homes bonus consultation is expected soon about the future of the new homes bonus going forward into 22-23 and beyond, and that could possibly improve the funding position, but at the moment we just don't have that information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. So the recommendation as set out in the report is as follows. To the Council that the updated medium-term financial strategy for 2021-22 to 2023-24, as at the 28th of January 2021 at Appendix 1, be recommended to Council. If any member wishes to second that motion, please unmute and state your name.
Seconded.
I'll go with Councillor Stamp for a change.
Well, I had trouble with the technology last time.
Thank you both. Are there any members who wish to speak on this before we move to the vote? And I think Councillor Tony, you still have your hand up from the previous item. Unless you want to speak on this one. No? Okay. So can we take the report and the vote via assent, please?
Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So we now move to agenda item 12, annual review of financial regulations, found on pages 297 to 356. And surprise, surprise, I'm going to call on Mr. Leslie to present the report.
Apologies, Chair. This is the annual review of the financial regulations. We're just required to keep it up to date. The appendices, you can see the changes that are being made. I mean, this year it is just a case of making sure it aligns to current structures as well. So there's actually no significant change around the financial regulations. It's mainly ensuring that it accords with our current strategy rather than pointing to posts which are redundant or things that no longer exist. So it's basically an update to refresh our current working arrangements.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. So the recommendations as set out in the report is as follows. Recommendations to the Council that the revised financial regulations attached at Appendix 1 be approved. If any member wishes to second that motion, please unmute and state your name.
Second, Councillor Lagan.
Whoa, Councillor Lagan, thank you very much.
Got to have a go.
Are there any members who would like to speak on this report? Okay, can I take that via assent then, please?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much, members. So we move to agenda item 13, contract procedure rules review and update, found on pages 357 to 394. And I call on Mr. Leslie to present the report.
Okay, so again, a review that needs to take place, but there's some more substantial changes proposed in this one, and they're outlined in section 3 of the report. And of course, there's the track changes as well, so you can see that in the appendices. I will highlight here that previously the tender value threshold was actually reduced from 50,000 to 25,000 in the past as a result of a change. However, there was actually no legal requirement or otherwise to reduce the threshold down to that 25,000. So the proposal is actually to put it back up to 50,000 to where it used to be. The reason for that is one, it's operationally easier to actually go, and we also had, I think it says there in the report, actually the auditors actually commented on the low threshold, which does make it operationally difficult at times. The other reason is that the Reset and Recovery Working Group, looking at how we could assist local businesses, one of the things that we can do is actually look at how we have barriers for them to access council work. And one of the ways is to make sure that they have equal access, where you can look at businesses who may be very good at their trade, but perhaps aren't as experienced in terms of bid writing and actually winning those bids. So it provides us some flexibility to support our local businesses, which came out of the Reset and Recovery Working Group. I think it'd be remiss of me as well if I didn't highlight that within there it's a request that the Director of Resources has the discretion to agree other methods of disposals of council assets up to a value of £5,000 in consultation with relevant directors. That's been added there because we can have quite low value disposals, which does make it difficult at times to dispose of it, should we say, efficiently because of the current requirements in place, but obviously we would still be seeking best value for money in that.
Thank you, Ms. Leslie. So before I go to the recommendation, like Mr. Leslie, I would like to thank the COVID-19 Reset and Recovery Group for all the work that they've done and for the work that they've done in terms of bringing these forward, these items to this committee. And there's been some excellent work on that particular working group. So I'd like to thank them for that. So the recommendation as set out in the report as follows, and that is to the council that little 1, that the revised contract procedure rules at Appendix 1 are approved, that the Director of Resources is authorised to make minor changes to the contract procedure rules. Minor changes are defined as changes in statutory framework, such as references to new or updated legislation, changes in titles, names or terminology, changes consequential to other constitutional changes already made. If any member wishes to second that motion, please unmute your microphone and state your name.
Second, Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. So I'd now like to invite members to speak on this item, and the first person is Councillor Durham.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And I think I welcome any initiative to, put business to local businesses, and if they're not directly local, then certainly to Essex businesses. And I think that's really good. Just a quick question. I take it that OJU went out the window with the rest of the EU paraphernalia, because we did have, believe it or not, things like the leisure contract and the waste contract. We had to go through the OJU procedure, which was, let's just call it a pain in the neck. But I'm assuming that's not.
I'd have thought so. Councillor Channer.
Could I just answer that?
Yeah, of course you can. Yes.
It's no longer called OJU. It doesn't actually have a name, so we're just calling it over threshold. But those thresholds still apply. There is a consultation for transforming public procurement. There's a green paper, and that should close in March. So in a month or so, a couple of months. But the government are looking at simplifying the whole process. It was just, they stopped dead on 31st of December, and it's all a bit up in the air at the moment, but it is working towards making it a much simpler process. I should add that the OJU and any process at Malden has been extremely complicated, and we've worked quite hard to try and pull that back and simplify it right across the board.
Okay.
Can I have a supplementary
yes,
then? Yeah. So just to clarify, so we're not having to offer our contracts to European businesses then, which was the case under OJU.
No, what's happened now, where we would have to publish a contract advert that was over certain thresholds via OJU, the European portals. The government have now got their own one called Find a Tender, and it will be published across there, but there will be nothing going out via European portals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. White. Councillor Channer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just trying to get the document up here because it's easier than trying to go between my screen and the document on the screen. Just to say, I do welcome this report actually, because I think it does assist small businesses, which of course this council is always keen to do, offer the business community support. Just really about the process of it, because it did go to the COVID-19 Reset and Recovery Group, which was set up by council, but I noticed it's come to this committee. So I'm just interested in the travel of it really, because the COVID-19 Reset and Recovery didn't report back to council, I don't think, on this. So I was expecting, from what I can recall in actually the notes of that meeting, I think there was a presentation at that working group and it said it would go to council in January or February. But it seems that there's a layer come in. It's arrived at Strategy and Resources. So effectively now, it won't be going to the 4th of Feb because I can't see the timelines will allow that from what I'm looking at on here, my mobile. And therefore it'd be March, I'm assuming, this document will go forward. So there's a bit of delay in it. So I'm just wondering why perhaps it came to Strategy and Resources when I thought the document was going straight up to full council as a policy document of the authority to get approval on the 4th of Feb full council.
Mr. Leslie.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was I think the original intention, but what that process didn't probably appreciate is actually the contract procedure rules should go to S&R committee beforehand and then recommended on to council for that. That's actually the correct process to do that. So it's going to take a little bit longer, but that's the process it follows.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie, for that clarification. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I haven't seen the body of this document, but are we setting forward a process where we can encourage our local businesses to tender because I haven't seen that in there again. It might be that I just haven't seen it in there because this is important. Now we don't have to go through Europe. I think that we should make particular remembrance that we put local businesses to the fore and to try and allow them to see these contracts come up, because I know a lot of local companies don't know how to apply for these contracts. They might well be able to fulfill them, and I think particularly following on from COVID that we need to actually support the businesses and encourage them to apply for the tenders. So if we can, I'd like something put in to help that be done.
Thank you, Councillor White. I believe that's the intention of this new procedures, but Mrs. White, if you'd like to clarify for us.
Yeah, I'd like to make sure that it's actually written into the contract and it's to the fore.
No, sorry,
that
I was calling on Councillor White. Councillor White, I was calling on Mrs. Debbie White.
Sorry, yeah, my mistake.
That's okay. We can't actually do that at the moment. A procurement policy note was released by the Cabinet Office a little while ago that I circulated to the directors, which put quite a big emphasis on SMEs, local businesses, etc., and how to reserve by area. So from that procurement policy note, we would have been able to say we only want businesses from Malden, for example, to bid for this work. There's been a lot of legal review on that, so at the moment that's just under discussion. So we've got to be really careful how we move forward. In terms of encouraging local businesses, we do not have a procurement website, and this is something that I said back in the working group, that we actually need something on our website, something simple, something that people can see, and some contact details so that they can come to us and get the right information quickly. This will be follow as of the approval for these contract procedure rules. I did not want to put something up that we was waiting to change. I just wanted it to remain consistent and say this is what we do.
So once we have the procedure rules in place, then we can move it forward and set up portals on our website to encourage local businesses to
exactly.
Brilliant.
Yes.
That's absolutely fantastic. So I know that some of our businesses, they wouldn't do work for the council, but we're on a lot of the national lists. But a lot of local businesses don't even know how you get onto them and take it forward. But I mean, I wouldn't want it just for Malden, because I still need it to be competitive. But that's brilliant. The work you're doing sounds fantastic. So thank you. That's good.
It's going to have to be project specific, and then a view can be taken through the project group and the working groups that are in place.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mrs. White.
Thank you.
So we now move to the vote. Can we agree this report via assent, please?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Thank you. So we now move to item number 14, agenda item 14, which is the Council Tax Support Scheme 21-22, found pages 395 to 406. And this time I'm going to call on Mrs. Green to present this report.
Good evening, members. Hopefully this is a fairly straightforward report for you this evening. As part of our process for setting the Council Tax Support Scheme, which is the help we give to our residents on low income to pay their council tax, we are required by legislation to set the scheme each year. We can't have a rolling scheme. What's before you tonight is a proposal to keep the scheme substantially unchanged. There's a few minor changes which are to ensure that the scheme does stay consistent with the national scheme in respect of pensioners. And more specifically, there is a provision this year to ensure that mid-year, if there are any changes that are announced as a result, in particular of COVID, that the scheme can be changed mid-year if required. And what we saw last year is some changes to provide some additional income for people on universal credit. And because we had already set the scheme and they made no provision to amend it, there was an issue in that the customers that received that additional income could have been disadvantaged. So to ensure that doesn't happen this year, we have made sure that there is provision within the scheme to deal with any unintended consequences of any welfare changes that are introduced to assist customers in the year. Apart from that, members, I think the scheme, as I say, remains substantially unchanged, and we put it before you this evening. We have undertaken equality impact assessment to ensure that there is no adverse impact, and a copy of that has been attached to the report, members. And I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Green. So I'd like to now move to the recommendation, and the recommendation as set out in the report is as follows, which is to the council that little one, that the following changes to the existing local council tax support scheme LCTS are approved. Cost of living increase in line with the Department for Work and Pension Schemes be included in the local council tax support scheme for 2021-22 for pensioners only. B, that any legislative changes being introduced to the housing benefit scheme for 21-22 are mirrored in the council's LCTS scheme to ensure consistency. That amendments to the discretionary provisions of the LCTS to ensure that the council is able to administer the various schemes to reflect local and national guidelines. D, that the LCTS may reflect any additional changes to government welfare benefit regulations during the year which are intended to increase the income of benefit recipients and be introduced during a financial year to avoid any intended consequences to customers. E, that this decision has been made following members' careful reading of and regard to the equality impact assessment at Appendix 1. If any member wishes to second that motion, please unmute your mic. Thank you very much, Councillor Helm. I now invite members to ask any questions on this report. We'll take that they don't, Mrs. Green. I'd just like to say thank you very much for your hard work, and also the hard work that your team has been doing over the COVID situation, and you're doing sterling work.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
Okay, so can we take this report via assent?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. So we now move to agenda item 15, pay policy statement found on pages 407 to 414. And I will call on Mrs. Cardy to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. So to present the report, the pay policy statement is an annual statutory requirement which describes the approach of the authority on pay related matters, particularly the remuneration of the highest and lowest paid staff. It has to be annually approved at council and published on our website by the 1st of April. There are specific requirements that must be included, one of which is the pay multiple, which is the ratio between the highest paid earner, in our case the directors, and the average earnings for the whole workforce. In Malden, the highest paid is 3.7 times the average earnings. The government maximum for this is 20 times the average, so we fall well below this. The policy also sets out that MDC are committed to paying the real living wage to our lowest paid staff, and details the annual percentage pay increase, which is a nationally agreed increase. The committee are asked to agree this statement ahead of approval at council next week, and then publication on our website in line with the statutory requirements. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Cardy. So the recommendations as set out in the report is as follows. To the council, that the pay policy statement attached at Appendix 1 to this report be adopted for 2021. If any member wishes to second that motion, please unmute and state your name.
Councillor Helm, I'll second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Helm. Do we have any questions for Mrs. Cardy on this particular item? We'll take that as a no, Mrs. Cardy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So I would now like to put the report to assent. Can I have assent from members, please?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much, members. So we now move on to agenda item 16, which is the insurance tender found on pages 415 to 420. In a moment, I will call on Mr. Morell to present this report.
Good evening, Chairman and members. It's Al Morell, Resources Casework Manager. I'm the project lead for this report, and thank you to Debbie White for assistance in preparing it. We're working with an external broker to provide a solution for our insurance requirements, and we need to be compliant by the 1st of October of 2021. This is to ensure that we're protected against major losses and limit our financial exposure, but also to comply with our statutory requirements. There's a table in 3.4 which outlines the options that we're required to be tendered at an estimated total cost over the period of £1 million. Our proposal is for a solution which meets our needs for 5 years with an option to extend for a further 2 if we need to. We've already formed a project management group which is already met to start to deliver our requirements, along with a project plan to make sure that we can ensure that to obtain the best rates and that appropriate cover is secured by the deadline of the 1st of October. This is an outline of our recommendation, but again, more than happy to answer any further questions if required. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morell. So the recommendations as set out in the report are as follows. To the Council, that little 1, that the tender process to ensure the Council has compliant insurance contracts in place by the 1st of October 2021 be commenced. That little 2, that the insurance contract tender process to be put in place for 5 years with an option to extend the process for a further 2 years long-term agreement. Could anybody who'd wish to second that motion unmute your microphone and state your name now, please?
Second, Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. If any member would like to speak, so Councillor Channer, you've raised your hand.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just noticed it actually. Something's just come back in my memory cells. Gallagher, the broker or whatever. I'm actually, well, perhaps a family's dealing with something with them at the moment. So perhaps on this one, I just keep out the equation. Actually, okay. That's just come to me something.
All right, thank you, Councillor Channer. Councillor Swain.
Yes, I'm just interested, perhaps Mr. Morell could just give a brief idea. What are the major elements of that £1 million insurance? In other words, what's really costing us the most in insurance?
Okay, if I can call on my colleague Debbie White to potentially answer that question for me.
Mrs. White.
Good evening. Yeah, it's the different costs of all the different policies that you'll see, all the different lots that are listed in that report. Offhand, I can't remember the actual individual prices for each lot.
Is this something that if Councillor Swain requires, you can send to him after the committee meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, that's fair enough.
Is that okay?
Yes. Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Morell. Thank you, Mrs. White.
Thank you.
So again, can we agree this report via assent?
Agreed. Agreed.
Oh, Councillor Fleming, you've just raised your hand.
Too late now.
Too late, I'm afraid.
Oh,
Chairman, I'm not commenting. I said on this.
No, but Councillor Fleming. So, Councillor Fleming, was it any? Would you like to ask your question? We have now agreed it by assent, but was there a particular?
I would thank you. I was just interested in why the 5 years. Is it obviously we have to go to tender and employ a broker to do that? There's a cost involved. So do you set the price, an annual sort of price for the 5 year period plus another 2? Is it set, and the reason for the 5 years? I was interested to know.
Okay, we've calculated the price based on this year's premiums for insurance, which is the 144,270. And when you go to tender, you have to have the lifetime value of the contract. So irrespective of whether we're going to take up the 2 year option. So in essence, the £1 million is for 7 years worth of insurance. So that's kind of an estimate. What we've also done is the time and resource to carry out an insurance tender is immense. This is a year-long project, or, you know, we've sort of been looking at this, collating information for quite a while now. Generally, I would say that most tenders I try to keep at sort of 3+2 sort of terms. in the case of insurance, once these insurance companies are awarded the contract, first off, for that length of contract, that's not unusual for insurance. That's about normal. Secondly, we'll get a greater price at the offered through the tender process. And then with the insurance, we have to go back out every year to get prices for renewals. So because we are contacting them, it's not that just it's a static price. We did make some savings this year, very minimal, but this has now been picked up and looked at. And because of the amount of work that we're doing from a sort of a new perspective, we're hoping that we can bring the premiums down as of this year. So that's what we're looking for. So we're hoping that's worst case scenario price, but we did need to take this year's values.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. White. Thank you, Mr. Morrell. So we have agreed already by assent, so I will move on from that agenda item. So we move on to agenda item 17, which is the corporate plan update 21, 20 to 23, found on pages 421 to 426. Mr. Dodson, would you like to present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As set out in the committee report, it's recommended that a task and finish working group be established by this committee to review and validate the corporate plan update against the feedback received from the member engagement survey. As members will be aware, this survey, held between the 4th and 18th of January 2021, sought views on the existing corporate plan, whether there were any particular areas of the council's work focus that members felt council resources could be better deployed to, and for the first time, which common values should be adopted for the organisation. Once established, this working group would distill the feedback received and consider this against proposed outcomes of the updated corporate plan prior to its consideration by council for adoption in 2021.
Could I just pause you? Councillor Swain, could you please switch off your microphone? Councillor Swain, could you please switch off your microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Dodson. Would you like to continue?
Okay. Yes, basically the working group would distill the feedback received and consider this against proposed outcomes of the updated corporate plan prior to its consideration by council for adoption in March 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dodson. So the recommendations are that the progress made on developing the update to the corporate plan be noted. Little 2, that a corporate plan task and finish working group be established to review and validate that updated corporate plan prior to its referral to the council in March 2021. Little 3, that 6 strategy and resources committee members be appointed to serve on the corporate plan task and finish group. If anybody member wishes to second that motion, please unmute your microphone and state your name now, please.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. I would now ask members if they wish to speak on this item. Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just recollecting PGA committee actually a little while back, and there was considerations, obviously the performance of the corporate plan and the thematic areas. And I do recall, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm just a little bit disappointed, I guess, because obviously it's now come to SNR, and I think that was actually mentioned in the minutes of PGA that it would come up at SNR. But the working group that's being done, this is a whole council matter. And I just make the point that we've had the member engagement survey done, but I do recall it being said, and I think I might know the reasons for this, but there was meant to be, or certainly it was reported at PGA, an all council workshop on the corporate plan, because obviously it is a whole council matter. And it's come to SNR, and the working group is being taken from this committee. Whereas previously, regarding corporate plans, there was a working group, I think, that was taken from across the whole council in terms of the corporate plan and looking at it, because then you had a balance from where members might be coming from. So I think what's happening is the engagement survey is replacing the workshop. We've got the working group will now look at what members and other persons might come forward with, and then bring something back to this committee, and that will recommend to council, where the corporate plan to me is a holistic thing that whole council should consider, and any working group should come across the membership of all committees. That's just a point I make, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. There is a name in this, in terms of this committee, in terms of it's called strategy. So the corporate plan does connect into strategy. If the working group decides perhaps that we do need to have some kind of wider full council session, then obviously that could be part of what that working group identifies. But in terms of the strategy, in terms of the thematic strategies, they report into the Strategy and Resources Committee, and that's the way that it is defined. Am I correct in that, Mr. Dodson?
Clearly, this is the Strategy and Resources Committee, and it would be appropriate for the strategy development to come through this process. I do absolutely note Councillor Channer's comments, and it was the initial initial direction was that we were looking to have a all council working workshop at the start, but we did, as Councillor Channer noted, replace that with the survey, which got a good engagement. We had over around 70% of members responded into that by the deadline, which was really useful and has informed the discussion which will happen at the working group should it go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Dodson. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to echo Councillor Channer's concerns. I feel disenfranchised. So, yeah, I personally feel that limiting membership to Strategy and Resources Committee members, possibly limits expertise across the membership. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Councillor Channer, you wanted to come back.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, part of the reasoning as well, I think, across the whole council, and why I would have thought a workshop would have been a very good idea, and whether or not that can still come into the process, although I recognise it's saying got to be report back at March, a bit timely. And this is no disrespect at all, but I think we have newer members on the council, and to be faced with a member engagement survey about a corporate plan they may not have necessarily had the involvement in at the time, and it was 2019, I think it largely done about February 2019. To have a whole member workshop where they could get a greater comprehension and understanding, I think would have been a beneficial thing, like we've always done, like with the LDP and things like that. Yes, there was a panel from a committee, but then it went forward and there were briefings and seminars. So that's part of my disappointment, really, I think, to assist actually those members that came on in 2019, which may not have been involved in the process, and would, I think, have achieved great benefits from an all-member workshop. And most certainly, I do think the membership should be spread from across the council, because it is a council document. I appreciate what you've said about this is the strategy and committee, a resources committee. But yes, strategy doesn't necessarily have to encapsulate with that the corporate plan. And as I say, normally, to my knowledge, most certainly the last corporate plan was a matter of full council. The working group came from that, and it reported to full council. I think I'm correct on that, and stand to be corrected if I'm wrong. But I just make that point, and I can see Councillor Fleming's point of view.
I can appreciate that point of view, and it is discussion that me as chairman of Strategy and Resources has had with other members and the leader of the council, and we decided at this particular point in time that because we want to move this forward. Now, in terms of the corporate plan, plan is not the one that was originated in 2019. It has been updated already. So we are moving forward with that corporate plan. It is not the same corporate plan. And from what I understand, there's been far more engagement with this corporate plan than there was in 2019. So we will, if we as whoever's in the working group decide that there needs to be more engagement within the council as it moves forward, then that sort of thing can be introduced. But at the moment, we need to move this forward. And the idea behind this is we are now establishing an update to the corporate plan. And around that, we are having the working group to move it forward. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I listened deeply with the debate, and whilst I was listening, I actually take umbrage at the COVID comments that the skills base of the newer members may not be sufficient to actually contribute to a successful corporate strategy. And you can shake your head all you like, but that's what you were saying. I feel that there's a lot of skills base, a lot of knowledge, and an awful lot of good that can come from a fresh approach, looking at a corporate plan to take a fresh administration into the future, rather than hankering on and putting your hooks back into the things in the past. So I fully support this being a strategic plan through a strategy and resources committee. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lagan. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we need to take this forward. It needs to be forward thinking. But I also think this should be an all-member working group. I mean, the corporate plan is really, really important. And I think to just dumb it down to a few members is sort of unreasonable and unsafe. And I think we have a lot of old and new members with lots of skills, not just confined to half a dozen members. And I honestly think we should make it a wider group. I mean, with the online meetings, does it really matter whether it's 6 members or 26 members? And I think it should be a far bigger working group than just this committee. And I think this is really important for democracy and for the residents to make it more open. I don't think we should make it so inclusive or exclusive, should I say, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor White. I'm not sure about the word dumb. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you just need to look at our screens to see how many experienced councillors and inexperienced councillors are actually on this committee themselves. SNR, I think many of you have been around for a heck of a long time. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty. There's a proposal on the table. I think we should go with the recommendation that 6 members are elected or nominated from this, and we take it forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Councillor Durham.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there might have been a misunderstanding with, unless I'm very wrong, with what Councillor Channer said. I think what she was saying is that there's a lot of expertise and skill with members who aren't on SNR. There are lots of new members on PG&A that may be, equally able to contribute. I don't think she was saying that the new members haven't got the skills. I think we've established that there's a wide range of skills, but the concern was that there may be very able people on other committees that are. So I think Councillor Lagan just misunderstood that. I'm in two minds here. I think that the danger of a much bigger and wider committee. We all know what happens with committees. You end up with a camel. And when you've got too many people, so I think that the working group should consist of people with the right skills, the right experience. Now, whether that is just from SNR or whether the other members should be included, that's another matter altogether. But I certainly wouldn't want 20 odd people on the committee, as I said, because it's too unwieldy and you never actually make any decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. I was actually going to say pretty much what Councillor Durham did. I felt very much that Councillor Chandler's point was that there are new members that haven't been able to take part in one of these before, who aren't on this committee, so they won't be able to this time either. So I think the snippiness of remarks goes both ways, to be honest, and I think it's time it stopped.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Swain.
I can't hear anything. I don't know if my internet's down or my.
No, Councillor Swain's on mute.
Right. Yes, I mean, calling this a task and finish group. it's not going to finish. It's not going to come up with a finished article. It'll include things like values and principles, objectives, and perhaps some key policies in the end. And this could all be subjected to scrutiny, criticism, addition by other members when it comes to formal consideration. So it's not too important that we have a big committee at this stage or big working group. It's going to be subject to criticism eventually anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. I have no more other members who wish to speak. So, Councillor Durham, you want to come back?
No, I just want to say, yeah, what Councillor Swain has said. I mean, it is going to be a devil's own job to come up with a meaningful corporate plan, particularly in such uncertain times. You know, there are so many factors. You know, we have LGR still, you know, bubbling under there. We have all sorts of things. We still have, you know, the COVID situation. It's very important that, you know, we don't write this on a tablet of stone and have to keep to it. It should be a fluid enough document that can change with the changing circumstances. Thank you.
So if we go to the recommendations, I would like to nominate from the chair in terms of little 3 and amend the recommendation that the 6 Strategy and Resources Committee members be appointed to serve from the Corporate Plan and Task Finish Group, and they will be made up of 4 independents and 2 Conservatives. And the 4 independents will be Councillor Richard Siddle, Councillor Wendy Stamp, Councillor Christopher Swain and Councillor Kevin Lagan. So I would ask the Conservatives to nominate 2 people from their group. Councillor Channer.
Oh, well, I'm happy to nominate Councillors Durham and White.
Okay, thank you very much. So I now move to the vote. Can we take this via assent, or do we need a recorded vote? Councillor Helm, you've put your hand up.
Is that for me, Chairman?
You've just put your hand up.
Yes, that's right. What about Democratic Alliance? Are we cut out as well now?
So we are looking at ensuring that we focus on the main groups of the council. Those main groups of the council are the independents and the Conservatives. I have put forward the recommendation, which is 4 independents and 2 Conservatives.
I would like to put a recommendation. You have 1 Democratic Alliance, please.
So we'd have to vote on the first recommendation, which has already been put forward. If that recommendation fails, then we will take a second recommendation. So
thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so are we going to do this via assent, or do we need a recorded vote?
I'll second you, Chairman. Make sure you've got a seconder. So
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Are we doing this? So can I take this via assent?
I'll assent to it.
Well, Chairman, actually, I do recall there is another working group where I proposed something and the leader did say it was a good idea, and we did allow to have a 7th member, which was from the Democratic Alliance.
The
so
recommendation has already been put by myself. If that recommendation fails, we will go to a second recommendation. So I take that we need a recorded vote. So Tara, could we have a recorded vote, please?
Yes, Chairman, of course. Chairman, are you wanting to vote on all the recommendations or just the working group for the moment?
I think all the recommendations together.
OK, Chairman, so that's the 3 recommendations, and that the 6 members of the working group be made up of the 4 independents, which is Councillor Siddle, Stamp, Swain and Lagan, and the 2 Conservatives, which is Councillor Durham and Councillor Miss White.
Correct.
Members, so if you could indicate for, against or abstain, please, when I call your name, starting with Councillor Mrs Channer, please.
Against, because of the Democratic Alliance.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
Yeah, I'm afraid I vote against because I think the Democratic Alliance should have a recognition.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Helm.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
For, please.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Stilts.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
For.
Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Against.
And Councillor Miss White.
Against, because this is not democratic.
And the results of that are 6 for, 5 against and no abstentions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. So that is approved. So we now move on to agenda item 18, donation of laptops for Essex children, found on pages 427 to 428. I would like to call on Mr. Leslie to present the report.
I do
Chairman, I declare an interest. Sorry, at the beginning I should have highlighted this one. I'm an Essex County Councillor. It's an Essex County Council scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Tanner. Councillor Helm, you still have your hand up and you still have your mic
yes, on. I did say I still have my hand up. I'd like to thank you very much for cutting me out. Thank you.
So, Mr. Leslie.
Yeah, thank you. We've had a number of approaches from outside bodies and also councillors to donate laptops to help homeschooling of children, also in this digital age. And our current policies would require approval at committee, as the S&R committee. I have to say, at the original time of doing this, we did expect to have more laptops to come forward as well. And I think perhaps the need for a committee report on this does help evidence the need for the delegation that was given earlier under the contract procedure rules. So I think that's probably a good step forward. So we don't necessarily need a report to come to S&R for things like this in the future, should that be approved. But ultimately, you can see there 4 laptops and 4 iPads that potentially we don't need, obsolete, a surplus to requirements due to their age. You can see there that the figures in section 4.1 there give the financial implications of that in terms of what we could possibly have got should we have sold the items. So all that information is available to the members.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. So the recommendation as set out in the report is as follows: that the Council's 4 remaining obsolete laptops and 4 iPads are donated to Essex County Council's laptop recycling scheme. If any member wishes to second that motion, please unmute and state your name.
Second, Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Before I go to the debate, I would like to commend the leader for the initiative that they've taken on this and for being the driving force behind this recommendation. So I think that the leader of the council definitely needs recognition for raising this initiative and moving it forward. So thank you, leader. So the first person on the to speak is Councillor Durham. Councillor Durham? You seem to have frozen, so I'll go to Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh,
I was back. Do you want me to start, Chair?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry about that. I've got technical.
You froze completely.
Yeah, well, and even with the wood burner right next to me. Thank you very much. With the greatest respect to Councillor Stamp, I think this was an Essex County Council initiative. I mean, Essex County Council have done that, as at last week, given out 3,000 Chromebooks and laptops to secondary school children, and they're just in the process now of supplying iPads to primary schools because primary schools have been predominantly using them. I mean, yeah, I totally support this. Obviously, it's absolutely vital that children are helped to homeschool. I'm just a little bit surprised we only got 4 kicking around. I mean, I would have thought there were lots of them, but if it's only 4, 4 is that's fine. It's interesting to note that Essex County Council have commissioned a Malden-based company to do the reconditioning, so it is actually benefiting Malden businesses. So yep, I commend it.
From what I understand, there is more obsolete equipment, but it is mostly desktops rather than laptops and iPads. So we do have a lot of desktop computers.
Chairman, they will take those and break them down for spares, and the funds that are raised will go to purchase new Chromebooks. So they'll take absolutely everything.
So maybe there's something we can explore with Mr. Leslie after this committee. It is an Essex County Council initiative, but in terms of moving this forward within Malden District Council, it is the leader who has driven this. So we do commend the leader for doing it. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. Everybody seems to speak before I get a chance at the moment. But yes, I think members who know me and members who maybe even don't know me very well, I don't steal people's ideas and other authorities' ideas. It was muted quite some time ago, but it has taken quite a while for me to get this to come to council. It is something that I strongly support, and I also would like to put an amendment to the proposal, if at all possible. And the fact is, my amendment would like to say specifically to Malden District schools, not just to go into the Essex County Council pot, because we know that's a greater, wider expanse. So I would like to propose that amendment, Chair. If Mr. Leslie and the officers, it isn't going to incur a great deal more hard work for the officers to administer. Thank you,
Mr. Leslie, is that possible?
Short answer is I don't know, because it's an Essex County Council scheme, so I don't know how they would allocate laptops and how they operate. I think we could probably say we will do that if possible, could be an alternative. I can't guarantee it one way or another because I simply don't know the scheme. Sorry.
Chairman, I do know that a large number have already been provided to Burnham schools from Essex. It might be difficult to say that the very items that we give will go to Malden schools, but I'm sure if you request that, you know, if you give four additional go out, yeah.
Chairman, can I come back? I know I've not spoken a lot. Thank you. The reason that I want it to go to the district is that I have been contacted by schools, as I'm sure other members of this council have, because there is a need. If you've got a family of 4 children under the age of 15 and the parents are working from home and they've only got 1 laptop and 1 phone, some students are working till 10 and 11 o'clock at night to try and do their schoolwork and their homework. And I know that's the same everywhere else, but I'm the leader of this council and we need to do what we can for this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Channer.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Councillor Dunn, it is an Essex very successful scheme, and I'm glad to see this council's getting on board because a number of other councils are already. And I was going to make the point about Malden schools as well, because I am aware I do think that's perfectly feasible, and I'm sure the Cabinet member, Councillor Louise McKinley, would actually be happy to talk about that and make sure that the laptops do come. One question I do have, I know we're talking about 4 and we're hearing about desktops which can be utilised, as Councillor Drum's highlighted. Would this be a rolling programme? So therefore, we've got very specific here tonight about numbers. Are we saying that's just the one-off, or is it envisaged this will be a rolling programme, because we're doing the rolling things as we know under the capital programme tonight we've just seen, so that this will be ongoing and that therefore whatever may be, you know, subject to us not requiring any further will be going to this scheme, which is worthwhile. And it is a case, I mean, there are families, I have some deprived areas in my division and indeed my ward at Malden, and often a family, if with a number of children, especially with homeschooling or other things or other educational benefits, it can be difficult if they may not have a computer, or indeed they may have some out-of-date stuff and the whole family is trying to share. So it's a very, very good scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that my understanding is that, Leader, you can say that you want the Chromebooks, laptops to go to Malden district schools. That's my understanding, is you can specify or request.
Okay. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just say that I absolutely support them being distributed to needy families, because it's a big expense, a difficult time, and I'm all for recycling. So I think any time we can recycle these, you know, I think it's a fantastic idea, and I absolutely support it 100%.
I think with the procedure rules that we talked about earlier in the committee meeting, I think it will be directors will enable this. They'll be able to do this without it coming to committee. So this can be an ongoing program. It doesn't necessarily need to come to committee in the future because of those procedure rules that we've made earlier in the meeting. Councillor Thompson.
You just said it for me, Chairman. Thank you. I was going to say, could we put in the amendment so the directors can do this, delegated. Thank you.
Okay, are those previous hands Councillor Chan and Councillor Stamp, or so Councillor Stamp?
Thank you. The reason I wanted to bring it as soon as possible was because I was aware that we are going to invest in new equipment, and I felt it was going to be too long that we could help the students in our district. So yeah, I've attended meetings with the Essex County councillors as well, and I'm really proud that we are actually doing something now. And I thank members for the support, and Mr. Leslie, who has moved heaven and earth, because I have been badgering him, and I know they're very, very busy. So I thank you all. That's great. Okay.
Councillor Channer, if you be succinct.
Just to say, Chairman, could it be, obviously this is going to go, we're going to make the specific requirements to say Malden, if members are aware of schools in their area or any families, perhaps could, inform officers so they have an awareness, of where the equipment could be best utilised. Just an idea. It might, could be across the district, or it might really needs to go to the areas where it's most required, really. But some of us may have knowledge of the schools that, the areas that might require them, the families or something. And in fact, some of the bodies that work in the voluntary bodies will have a good idea, because many of them are also working with the food bank and food parcel issues and other things that have a knowledge. The Children and Families Wellbeing Hub would probably have a knowledge of those families that could actually benefit totally from this sort of scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. So I'd like to go back to the recommendation then and try and incorporate some of the things we talked about. And that is that they said that the council's 4 remaining obsolete laptops and 4 iPads are donated to Essex County Council's laptop recycling, and that the same number of equipment is donated to schools in the Malden district. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Can you state your name? Councillor Stamp. Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Tara, have you got that amendment?
Yes, Chairman, I've got that. Thank you.
Councillor Channer and Thompson, you've come back again. Channer, Councillor Channer. Councillor Thompson.
Oh, sorry. I was only going to say, while I absolutely agree with that amendment, I'd hate the thing to fail and have to come back to committee because that couldn't be done. So could we amend the amendment to add that proviso that that's the ideal situation, which I absolutely support. But if it can't be done, then we just go ahead anyway, rather than drag it back.
Yeah, well, I'm sure
the leader, this should be done as soon as we can. It's, too many people have managed too long without the right equipment.
Again, I think that with the changes in procedure, then the directors will be able to make those decisions without coming to committee. So I think we can take that as read. So can we take that via assent, or do we need to record it? So we'll take that assent.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, members. So I now move to item number 19. Any other items of business that the chairman of the committee decides are urgent, and there are none. So I now move to item number 20, which is the exclusion of the public and press. That under the section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act, and that this satisfies the public interest test. Could a member please second that motion? Second that. Thank you, Councillor Durham. Can we agree that via assent?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Agreed. So Tara, I'll wait for you to confirm that we are stopping recording.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just get confirmation.
Chair, can we have a comfort break, please?
We can have a comfort break. So should we have a 5-minute break